everyone, welcome to the Kata the Self-Tortured Creator's Commentary video. I thought I would do this about my comic book that I made. For people that have been long time part of my channel, you guys know that comics and animation are pretty much the foundation of everything I do on here. And I was so honored to finally be able to make my own published comic book through Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing. This story has been in my mind since the pandemic. I remember in the pandemic making all these comic panels and I couldn't quite nail what I wanted. So really this story is 3 years in the making. It originally began as an entirely different type of story. I had it more in a sci-fi world with a character very similar to how Kata would turn out, but ultimately I ended up scrapping that because my editor wanted it to be an entirely different story. My editor wanted it to fit within the parameters of what they were looking for, and unfortunately, when you're doing this also for university, you have time constraints as well. So yeah, if you guys would like to check this out and buy this comic, I'd be so honored. In the link in the description below, you'll be taken right to the Amazon link to the comic, and it'll be printed and shipped right to your doorstep. If you do buy it, I really hope you enjoy it, but otherwise, this creator's commentary will just go over some of the highlights of things that I think you guys will like, and I will contain a spoiler warning in case. Alright, so let's get started. We sort of begin with Kata. Right now, he's in the middle of this sort of training session, and the whole idea with Kata is that he's just so ridiculously over self-critical. He's constantly feeling inferior, constantly feeling like lesser than and littler, so much that I made this sort of bleeding hand over here become sort of a motif for him. I never quite confirmed during the time skip that this guy and Kata are the same guy. Now that might sound like, well, it's obvious, same hair, they have the same look, it's just one's taller. And it is Kata. I sort of have this motif right here of the bloody fist serve as, this is Kata, this is who he is. He is very much one who's willing to put his body and mind to the limit in order to pursue strength. His master, Sensei Laura, is in many ways this moral compass for him. Sensei Laura is always there for him because she doesn't really have anybody else in her life. As a matter of fact, I have so much backstory planned out for Sensei Laura. My editor had me cut simply because of the time constraints and the parameters of the assignment. It was quite heartbreaking to get rid of her story because I feel like there's so much to be told here. I feel like she's very underdeveloped in this comic and there's so much more to her than the book gives you. But what I do hope people take away from her is that she's very much this pillar of support in Kata's life. She's this strong, unstoppable force of nature that sees strength much more beyond its physical capabilities. She's also heavily inspired from an old friend of mine I haven't talked to in a while. So if you're watching this, friend, I hope you're doing well, friend. Thanks for inspiring this friend. She sort of keeps him in check. She's the one that sort of lets him know there's so much more to him than the anger and pent-up frustration he feels inside. Now, as we get to the time skip, this is where we meet Archibald. He's pretty much based off Scottish lore. I sort of had him based off of this Scottish myth called the Beast of Buchan. The Beast of Buchan is this myth about a giant cat that roams the misty plains of Scotland, and I really wanted to channel that into this character. This is very much like an East meets West sort of scenario. I try to have the dynamics of Kata and Archibald's character designs reflect different art styles of different parts of the world. Kata represents this sort of more manga anime style, while I feel Archibald, I kind of took a lot of influence from Bruce Timm and Batman the Animated Series' art style, especially with the eyes and the way that his proportions are a lot more jagged and angular. I very much wanted to create that sort of dynamic of two different worlds coming together. Now, Archibald, what's funny is that when we first meet him in this sort of wrecked, destroyed cathedral, I really wanted it to sort of parallel Kata's house. In the beginning, we see that Kata is angry at himself for not being able to defend his house being robbed. And I very much wanted this idea of one's home being destroyed and ravaged to be mirrored by sort of Archibald's plight. Archibald struggles with the same thing that Kata kind of struggled with in the pre-time skip. But this time, Archibald doesn't really have a Sensei Laura to rely on. He doesn't really have his brothers with him to get him through what he felt like was a failure. He's just left alone. He's left alone to wallow in the destruction of his home, of his people, of everybody he loved. When it comes to the battle, I was inspired by all sorts of different animations and comics, but I'd argue some of the biggest ones were the very dynamic and accentuated fight scenes that you see in The Dark Knight Returns, as well as the detailed, impact-riddled fight scenes in Berserk. The rule of cool is one of my favorite rules. Just pretty much, I just like making... My whole goal with things is to make them look cool. This shot of Kata here I was particularly proud of. All of this was done through Copic markers, but I touched them up in Photoshop. I cheated a little bit with the background here. I used the stamp tool to just redraw the same wall from this shot over here. So I hope that's not too much cheating. It's very important to make sure your fight scenes have somewhat of a flow to them. One action leads to the other. The way that the body turns and rotates makes sense with each attack. So my rule, because I'm a martial artist in my spare time, I kind of understand the way the body turns and reacts. I understand when someone throws this attack, it's likely that the next attack will be this attack. So that really helped when making the fight scenes, kind of having my martial arts background. This is sort of reflected in the panel where Kata is just unloading a combination on him. So if he's throwing the right cross here, you could see that his hips are turned this way, facing toward us. And usually when you have your hips face towards us, your next attack will rotate the hips the opposite direction of where they're faced right now. So that's why he comes back with the left uppercut. Now the hips are facing away from us, they're facing the other way. Followed up by a right knee. This right knee here, again, you're turning the hips. Instead of them facing left, you're making them face over here. You're making them face towards us. You're turning them with your right hip. So that's why I wanted to create sort of a flow with each of the fight scenes so that the attacks seemed logical and these characters seemed very trained in their arts. It's very easy to just make things look cool and not really have much synergy from panel to panel with each attack in the fight, so I really try to make that a point. Okay, so we're going to be entering into some spoiler territory here, so just be warned. If you don't mind spoilers, that's cool. But yeah. Here we go. As we start to get toward the end of the comic, we see that Kata recalls the lesson from Sensei Laura early. Just the very simple, this is just a very simple, like usually in a beginner kickboxing class you'll learn a combo like this, but I still feel like it gets the job done. It's simple yet effective. That's one of the best martial arts tips you could learn, is simplicity is sometimes the most effective way to dismantle your opponent. This was one of my favorite panels of the entire comic. I was really proud of this one. I felt with the Copic markers I did a good job of having the fire kind of light up the characters while at the same time create this sort of illumination glowing effect around there. I love drawing traditionally. There's just something about your pencil and pen being on paper that no matter how far technology goes, you just can't replicate. I had the background sort of become fire throughout this whole final part, simply because we were getting close to the deadline and drawing the background over and over again proved to be extremely difficult. So I was like, okay, let's crush two birds with one stone. Let's make the background look cooler while at the same time simplifying it so I don't have to draw as much. Sometimes finding those shortcuts are very important to help you reach a deadline. Now, as we get to this part of the story, we learn about Sensei Laura's fate. Kata may have surmounted what was a demon that he was fighting, but in beating his demons, he learned the truth. He learned the truth that unfortunately his master didn't quite make her battle against the entire army. She is the strongest character in this entire story. Like, if Kata and Archibald teamed up to fight Sensei Laura would easily dismantle them. The only reason why she lost was simply because she had to take on the entire cathedral worth of Archibald's men. And by the time she got to Archibald, she's exhausted. She is winded, she is battle damaged and bruised. And now, only Archibald stands in her way. And Archibald barely manages to beat her. He stabs her right through the abdomen, killing her, but not without suffering the damages that she caused. Kata, upon learning the truth, is absolutely heartbroken. I changed the color style in this because I really was inspired by Neon Genesis Evangelion. There's a scene in one of the earlier episodes where Shinji is just kind of walking outside, and as explosions are going off, the entire scene is drenched in these pink and red hues. And I feel drenching your characters in the lighting of what's affecting the world around them can help hammer home the emotion you're trying to bring about in a scene. In this one, it's rage, it's a feeling of I just wasted everything, it's absolute confusion. We see Kata kind of learning here that everything is the exact same as it was. That same time back at the house when he couldn't protect his home from being robbed, it's the same exact thing. He can't protect the people he loves, and because of it, he feels like a failure. Then he remembers what Sensei Laura would say. He is a protector. He is someone who does good for others. In our failures, we learn to rise. Should we wait till our darkest moments subside, we'll find ourselves in the lightest places possible. And with this newfound knowledge, Archibald, who's very much a parallel to Kata in many ways, is left in the ashes of the past, while Kata learns to move forward with the past, but create a better future for himself, pave his own path. So I just want to give a special thanks to everybody that's in the special thanks section. Alex Tio Gonzalez, he's my uncle. He helped scan all of the papers into the computer, which allowed me to work on every illustration in Photoshop. So thank you, that was essential. Otherwise we'd have no comic without him. Joey Valentino is not only my bestest bud, but he was there since the beginning of this story. I remember back when it was that sci-fi thing I was mentioning earlier, he was there to critique it and help me forge it into the story that it is today. So thank you very, very much. My other bestest bud, we got Georgia Pappas. I will link to their artwork in the description below. They are an awesome artist, so please check them out. Antonio is Joey's brother, so you could stop the theories and speculation. I'm kidding. Antonio is the main character, I think, of everybody's life. Like, he's just so much main character energy emanates off of this guy. He's good at everything. He's an amazing band guy. He's an amazing artist. He's an amazing animator. His stuff is one to look out for. He's like a little brother to me. Love that kid. Lorenzo was also there during the pandemic when I first made this story. You know, very encouraging. He offered, him and Joey actually dormed together back in college, and it was really cool to just kind of visit their dorm and sort of help foster ideas for the story there. So thank you, Lorenzo. Vanessa Nilsson, my editor, my person who was critiquing everything along the way. Thank you so much. She also helped me get my degree in university, so I can't thank her enough. And David Klein and Silema Diarra are people from my dojo where I train at. They let me at their dojo illustrate the pages you see in this comic, and I'm forever thankful for that. And of course, martial arts I've learned from them were essential in making the fight scenes for this. So thank you both so very much. Anyways, that was the comic. I really hope you guys enjoyed it, this creator commentary video. Batman, was with me the entire time. I meant to put him up here, but I kind of forgot to do that. So here's Batman now. If you guys want to buy the comic, once again, it's on Amazon.com. I'll have it linked below. I hope you guys learned something about art or something about martial arts even. If you wanted to learn more about, you know, the comic publication process and stuff like that, you can comment that below. I'd love to make more about my comic, and I'd love to make more. I've gotten a few requests to make a sequel to Kata, and I would love to do that. I would love to do that, but I'm kind of at this road where I don't know if I want to make something completely different or create a sequel to kind of tell the stories I never was able to tell that I had to cut out of this one. Because again, Sensei Laura has an entire story that I had to cut from this comic. I would love to listen to your guys' opinion. Thank you so much for this. Batman says bye.